Humans didn't domesticate dogs. That's the version in the textbooks, the one in every documentary, the one that feels obvious. It's also wrong. The current evidence points to something stranger, that dogs chose us, that the process ran in the opposite direction from everything we assumed, and that the animal sitting at your feet right now is the result of a decision its ancestors made without any human involvement whatsoever. Here's what the standard story gets wrong. The traditional model, humans find wolf pups, raise them, selectively breed the compliant ones over generations, eventually produce dogs, has a structural problem. Wolf pups raised by humans do become temporarily tame, but they don't stay that way. As they reach sexual maturity, the underlying wolf biology reasserts itself. The aggression returns, the wariness returns. The animal that seemed domesticated reveals that it was only ever tolerating captivity. Breeding tame wolves in captivity requires constant human selection pressure across hundreds of generations to produce anything resembling a dog. The timeline doesn't fit. The archaeological record doesn't support a controlled breeding program running for the tens of thousands of years the genetics require. Something else happened. The genetic evidence is precise on one point. Dogs and wolves diverged somewhere between 15,000 and 40,000 years ago, depending on the study. A 2021 analysis published in PNAS by Anders Bergstrom and colleagues at the Francis Crick Institute placed the divergence before the earliest known human settlements, before agriculture, before the conditions that would have made deliberate domestication possible. Dogs genetically predate the civilization that supposedly created them. That timeline forces a different question entirely. If humans weren't running a breeding program, what was? The answer that has accumulated across the last 2 decades of research is called self-domestication. The hypothesis, developed in detail by Brian Hare at Duke University, among others, runs as follows. Among the ancestral wolf population living near early human camps, there was natural variation in fear response. Most wolves maintained the standard threat calibration. Stay away from humans. The calculus is simple. The risk is not worth it. But some individuals sat at the lower end of that fear distribution. They could tolerate closer proximity to humans without triggering a flight response. Those individuals had access to something the others didn't. Food, the scraps, the refuse, the caloric surplus that human camps generated in quantities no wild predator had ever encountered before. Lower fear meant better access to resources. Better access to resources meant better survival rates. Better survival rates meant more offspring. The low-fear wolves bred with other low-fear wolves. Generation by generation, without a single human making a single intentional decision, the population shifted. The wolves weren't being domesticated. They were selecting themselves. But self-domestication through fear reduction alone doesn't fully explain what dogs became. A wolf with simply less fear of humans is still a wolf. What produced the animal that seeks eye contact, reads human faces, follows pointing gestures, and forms emotional bonds across species lines is something more specific. In 2005, Brian Hare published research in Science showing that dogs could follow a human pointing gesture to locate hidden food, a task that chimpanzees, our closest relatives, consistently failed. Dogs weren't just tolerating humans. They had developed a specialized cognitive toolkit for reading human communication. That toolkit didn't exist in wolves. It appeared somewhere in the self-domestication process, emerging not because humans bred for it, but because the animals that could read humans survived better in human environments. The cognitive shift followed the fear shift. Evolution built the relationship from the inside out. There is a physical dimension to this that researchers find difficult to dismiss. Dmitri Belyaev's famous fox experiment at the Institute of Cytology and Genetics in Novosibirsk, running from 1959 onwards, selected silver foxes purely for reduced fear of humans. Within 10 generations, the selected foxes began showing physical changes nobody had selected for. Floppy ears, curled tails, patchy coat coloration, juvenile facial features retained into adulthood. Changes to the adrenal system that altered stress hormone production. These are the same physical traits that distinguish dogs from wolves. Belyaev hadn't bred for any of them. They emerge as a package, linked at the developmental level to the single trait he had selected: tameness. The implication is significant. The physical dog, the animal we recognize, was not designed feature by feature. It was an automatic consequence of one shift in one behavioral threshold. Fear went down. Everything else followed. In 2015, a wildlife researcher named Günter Bloch documented something in Yellowstone that sits outside the standard framework. A gray wolf, a wild animal with no history of human contact, had been caught in a leg hold trap for an estimated 18 hours when Bloch's team found her. She was exhausted. The threat response that should have driven her to fight had burned through most of its fuel. When Bloch approached alone, moving slowly, he did something the data suggests matters enormously. He sat down. He reduced his height, removed his forward orientation, and simply stayed. For 11 minutes, the wolf watched him without lunging. When his team began working on the trap, she turned her head and watched their hands, not their faces, their hands, the thing that was helping. When the trap released, she stood, put weight on the injured leg, and looked directly at Bloch for a moment that he described in his field notes as the kind of eye contact that doesn't feel like it's passing between different species. Then she was gone. Bloch spent the rest of his career studying wolf-human proximity behavior. He said later that he didn't know what the wolf understood about what had happened, but he was certain she understood that something had. Think about what that means for the relationship. Every dog that has ever existed, every breed, every temperament, every individual animal is the descendant of a wolf that made a calculation its species hadn't made before, that the thing by the fire was worth moving toward rather than away from, that the risk was acceptable, that something on the other side of that fear was worth having. The wolves that ran are still wolves. The ones that didn't became something the world had never seen, not because humans shaped them, because they shaped themselves around us. We tend to tell the story of domestication as a human achievement, a demonstration of our intelligence, our ingenuity, our ability to bend nature to our purposes. The actual record suggests the dog arrived at our door before we thought to open it. We didn't build that relationship. We were selected for it. That's what the evidence suggests happened. Not a story humans created, but one that dogs wrote themselves. And if that changes how you see your dog or how you see yourself, then the data did what it was supposed to do. If you want more of these deep dives into animal behavior, evolution, and the hidden intelligence in the natural world, hit the like button and follow The Stickening. We will be doing new research breakdowns every week. And if you're wondering what else animals know about us that we haven't figured out yet, the next video is where we start looking. Thanks for watching.